What's going on, Redskin fans? It's your boy, Mr. Bags from Bloodshot Entertainment, back again with another video. This time we're going to break the 20 years down for Dan Snyder as the Washington Redskins owner. Now, I know it's been a up and down, mostly down, since Dan Snyder's been here, but we have to give him the benefit of the doubt, man. This guy bought the football team. He was 35 years old. Some of you guys aren't even 35 years old yet. So can you imagine running a NFL conglomerate at the age of 35? Now, when Dan Snyder first got to the Redskins, first year he took over from the Kent Cooks, we were 10-6. We was a pretty good football team. We was already put together. Charlie Cassidy already put a good little team together. We had Brad Johnson as the quarterback, Norv Turner as the coach. Pretty good football team. We finished 10-6. We made it to the playoffs. I think we lost in the first round. So all the signs was good to a good start. So the very next year, we have a great draft. We draft LeVar Arrington. We draft Chris Samuels. We bring in Deion Sanders. We bring in Bruce Smith, who was some older guys. That was the start of what's going on here? But then they predicted us to win the Super Bowl that year. Year started out, we won the first game, and then we lost the second game. Michael Westbrook, he goes out, ACL injury. Then all of a sudden, the season just goes downhill. Norv Turner fired with probably like 4 games ago. Terry Robisky is his successor, interim coach, and at that time, Terry did horrible. So that was a young Daniel Snyder running the football team. And you got to think, man, a young billionaire at 36 years old at that time, he doesn't really know much about running a franchise. So what does he do? He brings in Marty Schottenheimer, wants to bring in some defense. We fired Charlie Cassidy. We brought in Vinny Serrato, and then we fired Vinny. After that, we bring in Marty Schottenheimer. He takes over the whole football team. He makes all the football decisions. Twin Towers goes down. We lose 8 games in a row. Get rid of Jeff George. And once we get rid of Jeff George, Tony Banks comes in as the QB. And we salvaged the season. We finished 8-8 pretty good. And after that, it looks like, Marty was going to try to take the football team to another level. But Dan Snyder did not like the fact that he couldn't make any football decisions with Marty Schottenheimer. So he gets rid of Marty and he brings in Steve Spurrier. And brings Vinny Serrato back and then bring in Steve Spurrier. So like any good owner, Dan Snyder's like, Spurrier, what do you need? Spurrier's like, man, we don't need to go expensive. Just bring me a bunch of Florida guys. And that's what we do. We bring in Riddell Anthony and Shane Matthews, and I want to say we bought in Rex Grossman. I'm not sure, but I know we bought a lot of Florida stuff in. We drafted Patrick Ramsey, probably trading our picks, a lot of picks that year. We didn't have a lot of draft picks. Team was mediocre. He had a mediocre first year. So he comes back for a second year. In the NFL, it's different than college. Steve Spurrier is used to of not having long days like that. He's used to playing golf and things like that. So he really wasn't built for that. And he cut his cell phone off and said, I'll get back with you, and he quit. So then after that, Dan Snyder is probably 40 years old at that time. Still not experienced enough to run a NFL conglomerate at that time in your life. You're 41 years old. But then he does the best thing that you could do for this football team at that time. He brings back 3-time Super Bowl winner Joe Gibbs. The natives are excited. I'm excited. Joe's back. We're thinking we're getting some stability back because the first few years was, like I said, we started out the playoffs, and after that, we had 3 or 4 straight years of straight mediocrity. And Joe's first year wasn't that good. It wasn't that good at all. I mean, we draft Sean Taylor, we draft Chris Cooley, we draft 2 offensive linemen. We have 4 draft picks. You can't build a team off of 4 draft picks. But then the next year, we go to the playoffs. Mark Brunell, Santana Moss, everybody, we rally together, Clinton Portis, and we make a run. We make the playoffs. Next year, after that, we bring in Al Sanders as an offensive coordinator. But before that, this was the critical mistake done in the Joe Gibbs era. Because even though we had Joe Gibbs as the coach, we still had bad management. We still have Vinny Serrato as the manager. And we have the 9th pick in the NFL draft that year. And what do? What do? Best quarterback, arguably the best quarterback in the NFL right now was on the board. And we picked Carlos Rogers. No knock to Carlos Rogers. I think is a good NFL player. But Aaron Rodgers is on the board and we don't get him. And then after that, I think Green Bay picks 24th. They get Aaron Rodgers. We get Jason Campbell. I mean, think about that. Jason Campbell, Aaron Rodgers, Carlos Rogers. Bad mistake. So after that, we go on a little run again. Make the playoffs. But it's not Jason Campbell, it's Todd Collins. Sean Taylor, he gets killed. We rally. And Joe leaves. Joe, as he's out the door, he's telling Dan Snyder then, look, dog, let the defensive coordinator Greg Williams run the football team. And this was the start of when it got real weird in D.C. We hired Jim Zorn as an offensive coordinator. And then when we hired Jim Zorn as an offensive coordinator, about 3 days later, he's the head coach. We fire Greg Williams. We bring in, I don't even know who the D coordinator is. I forgot. I can't think of his name. I don't got no notes right now. And we started out 8-0 or 7-0 or something like that. It's looking good. I'm like, okay, maybe this Jim Zorn thing isn't bad. And all of a sudden, we lose the last 7 or 8 games and we suck again. Jim Zorn comes back the next year and we suck again. And at this time, I think Dan Snyder's probably about 45 or something like that, 46. Still not quite ready to run an NFL franchise yet. So what do? We bring in Michael Shanahan, Denver Broncos 2-time Super Bowl coach, to bring some stability to D.C. Starts off kind of subpar. We have a terrible year. 2012 rolls around. We trade most of all our draft picks, mortgage them for Robert Griffin III. And at that time, all the NFL experts was like, this is a terrible decision, bringing in Robert Griffin III. Not bringing in Robert Griffin III actually was a bad decision, but trading all our draft picks, which we could have built a good football team, still drafted Kirk Cousins in the 4th round, made some good draft picks, and we could have been a good football team. But everybody forgot about that because we had such a good rookie year with Robert Griffin, and it was crazy. At the end of the year, Robert Griffin gets hurt. He tries to come back early instead of getting healthy, and everybody knows the end of that story. In comes Jay Gruden. Jay Gruden comes in, and then we find out that Robert really doesn't know how to even read defenses. Doesn't know how to slide, doesn't know how to protect himself, and we bring in Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins rallies us. Next thing you know, we're in the playoffs. We didn't sign Kirk Cousins back. We bring in Scott. Scott doesn't bring Kirk Cousins. We don't have faith in Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins can't win night games, period. He doesn't win any primetime games. He's still doing the same thing in Minnesota. So at this time, we realize that we have to start over. And this is the point that where I'm talking about now. Daniel Snyder now is an older man. You make better decisions when you're older. You don't make decisions with haste, like firing Marty Schottenheimer so quickly, or bringing Jim Zorn in, or a sucky general manager like Vinny Serrato. So he's learning. Bruce Allen, they're learning. So what do? We scrap it. We start all over because we need an identity. And once they figured that out, Next year we get Deron Payne. We get another defensive tackle in that draft also. The next following year is where we're at right now. Quarterback. We bring in Dwayne Haskins. We bring in Montez Sweat. We have an excellent draft. So I say, man, 20 years have been horrible. 3 or 4 playoff appearances in 20 years isn't cutting it. But I think Dan Snyder has paid his dues. Being a young self-made billionaire, bought his favorite team. And it started out rocky. But now I think we're going to have an identity this year, you guys. So let's just give him a chance, see what's going on. I'm still not a fan of Bruce Allen, but I mean, Bruce Allen and Doug Williams and the guys at the scouting department, they've been doing a pretty good job the last 3 years. Now we have an identity. It's going to be defense and running the football. That's the first things. A success of making a good football team is an identity. So now I think he's finally got it after 20 years, letting football players, football minds pick the football team and falling back. And I think that we might be headed in the right direction. I'm not sure, but it's been a rough 20 years with Dan Snyder. We can't fire our owner, but I think that he's actually progressed. I think he's actually progressed, man. You have to pay your dues. You got to think, man, 35, 40 years old, could you run the Washington Redskins? Could you run the second most valuable franchise at that time in the NFL before the Patriots started their dynasty? So I'm kind of liking where we're going. 20 years, like I said, whew, been a rough 20 years, but he's learned. And now we're going to see. We keep all our draft picks. We got depth now, something we haven't had in a long time. We got depth at the running back position, depth at the wide receiver position, depth at the D-line, depth at the O-line. So now we're actually headed in the right direction. We got all our draft picks again next year. So now I'm thinking Daniel Snyder is finally getting it. He's finally getting it. He had to pay his dues. That's with anything. Anything you get in, you have to pay your dues. But should it have took 20 years? No, it shouldn't have. But I mean, like I said, man, it was a young owner. So now let's see where we're going to go. Where we going to go from this now? You know what I'm saying? Now that we got a little stability back in Washington. So that's all. I just wanted to break down the 20 years of Dan Snyder. And I hope you guys enjoyed it. Hell to the Redskins. Oh, and one more thing. I forgot a few key points of this whole thing. The Albert Haynesworth debacle. That was just absolutely horrible, paying Albert Haynesworth that much money. And I know I made another little error when I said we bought in Rex Grossman at that time. It wasn't Rex Grossman when we bought Spurrier in. It was Danny Warfel. And as you can see, that was a terrible decision in itself, drafting Patrick Ramsey with no type of protection to where he could even help himself to even become an NFL quarterback because we had no way of protecting him. So after that, he started seeing ghosts. He couldn't be a good quarterback. So I think we finally got it right, man. We got us a quarterback. Everybody's raving. Everybody's happy. I think this Dwayne Haskins kid, man, is a breath of fresh air in D.C. He's big. That's what we need. I heard Chris Sims say that he reminds him of Big Ben Roethlisberger. I mean, if he can give us 75% of Big Ben, man, hell, we'll be a heck of a football team. So, like I said, man, 20 years of Dan Snyder hasn't been great, but I think he's getting it. I think he's paid his dues. Now at 55, hell to the Redskins.